My college draft is proudly announced my conference called Educate You. Educate You core areas will cover recruitment, retention, and how to build a strong alumni base of underrepresented and first-generation college students. Good morning, good morning. You're welcome to another edition of the Educate You podcast being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. I am your facilitator, I'm Lamont, but I got my guys as always, Dr. Ricky Frierson, our in-house scholar, genius at strategy, and we have Mr. David Hartman, the Black Picasso. If you need anything that look like something, you want to go to David Hartman.
Facts.
Today's guest is Mr. Anthony Jones. Now, I personally feel like he's the James Brown of Howard, but I'll let him explain a little bit more about himself. Mr. Jones, feel free to let the people know who you are, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you to your fellow host. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I've been a fan of the podcast. I've enjoyed it. It's informative. It's entertaining. I've laughed. I haven't shed a tear yet, but I'm sure that there will be a show that will help me to do that. But it is certainly a pleasure. I have been in the work of really transformative human potential for the last 26 years. Started out in university admissions, transferred over into working with getting young people into corporate America through the Inroads organization, became national director of recruitment there. And then eventually went over to the corporate side and led diversity, equity, and inclusion for a large corporation based out of Cincinnati and with global locations around the world. Came back to higher education, led enrollment for a couple of institutions, and now do so at Howard University based here in Washington, D.C. So excited about what our people, I'm talking about Black and brown folk here now, y'all, are able to do and removing barriers from them to do so. So glad to talk about that today.
That's awesome. So, Mr. Jones, it sounds like you got a lot of passion. So tell me where it comes from, because, you know, where does all this drive derive?
Yeah, so you're looking at a South Louisiana kid. Grew up in Thibodaux, Louisiana. Still go there at least 2 or 3 times a year to get loaded up with my gumbo and boys and take my shoes off and walk down the street that I grew up on. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And it really was my neighborhood that put this sense of commitment to community in me. I'll never forget when I was coming out of high school and trying to decide what to do with my life, the direction that I would go. There was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Bell, who was a respected Black teacher in our community, who saw me walking across the street and just simply asked, "What's next for you?" And I didn't have an answer for that. And he looked at me and told me what was going to be next for me. He said, "You're going to go to college and you're going to do X, Y, and Z." And just that sense of commitment to me is hallmark of what was my surroundings and what I grew up with. And it never left me. Now, I will tell you, like most young people, I came into undergrad thinking that I would do one thing and ended up deciding to do something completely different. And really got fascinated with the classroom and its environment because of Black teachers, Black professors. I went to Fisk University there in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was the first time that I saw Black instructors, Dr. Frierson, standing in front of me, talking to me about scholarly ideas. And it just blew my mind. And that's when I really, the spark started to really rise in me that this was the industry where I wanted to make my mark, really this idea of turning human potential into manifestation. And I've been happy to do this and been successful at it for the last, as I said, 20 some odd years.
That's awesome. I asked Mr. Jones if he was one of the Jubilee singers. He said no, but I don't believe him. I didn't believe him. So what we love to do here is that we love to inspire. And so Dr. Frierson and Dave, I want you guys to talk about drive, because I need people to understand how driven you guys are and tell the people what makes your drive the way it is.
You want me to go first, David? Or
Dr.
you got
Pryor,
this?
go ahead.
Okay.
You
Okay.
got it.
First of all, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for sharing those. I think I'm just gonna bite off of what Mr. Jones said because he already got me inspired, to drive. Now I might be able. I got the energy to run a mile, and I might make it a quarter, but he gave me the energy. But I think what I heard that was influential about drive is someone he talked about he ran early into essentially what I want to say, not trying to bring too much of the spirit in here, but a prophet. Someone spoke into his life and spoke a word, and he watered that word in his own heart and in his own mind, and that flourished to fruit. And now he has a harvest of a testimony to share. And so that's what I want to do. I don't want to, get me started. But anyway, but no, I think part of it is you have to have someone who, as he was speaking, what I heard is what we need to start doing, especially with young Black or brown folks of color, is we need to start assuming up and not assuming down. A lot of times when we see people, we say, hey, what are you doing? You need to go to college, but we don't speak vision after college. We don't speak vision after goals. We speak vision of preventing something, right? So like, if you don't go to high school, you don't graduate, you're not going to go to college, you're not going to do this, this, and this. But why don't we start assuming up for our young kids? So the drive that I think I have is to be in a position to where I want to, and you all know this, David and Lamont, I'm actively trying to dismantle the visual stereotypes we have of people and assuming who they are. So when people see me traditionally on campus, or when I walk into a room, they don't see Dr. Fryers, and they just, are you here for athletics? So you do this. Are you here to get somebody? And when I walk into the dean's office, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, who are you, right? And so we need to start speaking a word of visioning up, assuming up. And so the drive that I have is to, in all intents and purposes, to be one that breaks those barriers. I mean, across my life, I was the first minority, first Black person to do a lot. First Black male in my high school to get prom king. First Black to graduate with a PhD with this new program at the University of Houston. First person in my family with a PhD. First diversity director at the university. So, I mean, I'm used to doing that. And I know that my presence, the drive that I have now is that I know just my presence, not to sound arrogant, so let me make that clear, but my presence is legendary and it creates legacy. Why? Because for majority folks, me walking into a space, it's the first time they've ever seen a Black male with a PhD. And so I know I'm making an impressionable mark just with my presence. And so that's what drives me, is that now I've put myself into a position to where I can inspire other young individuals of color to say, wow, he's the first that I've had who's had a PhD, who's a doctor, who's positive, da, 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 da. And if he can do it, and he's dressed the way he dressed, and he talks the way he talks, then I know I can do it. And so that's what drives me, is to really break these invisible barriers in the mind and the heart set, so that we can still flourish with the passion that we have in life.
And I'm supposed to follow that.
That was your choice. You could have went.
I tried to let you go first, David.
All right. So originally, I would say for me, mine is grown over time. Originally, it was just kind of to hush all the naysayers and to reach the goals that I set for myself, instead of buying into what someone else had for me visioned as a young Black man. So that's what my drive initially came from and started to grow from, and really being able to believe in yourself as well. So as both of you gentlemen have alluded to, one of the things that I do now is constantly try to speak life into the students that are around me, and also try to find ways to help them to be able to build themselves up. So when those difficult times do come, they can push forward and continue to try to reach their goals. So
That's awesome. Again, you're listening to the Educate You podcast, being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. So I want to go to you, Mr. Jones. We're experiencing a rise in support of HBCUs. So from your standpoint, I want you to talk about the impact from a local community and on a global scale of HBCUs.
I thank you for introducing the idea of locality into the question, because I think that that often gets forgotten because of the fact of how easy it is for us to lump all HBCUs into one bucket. From a principle standpoint, that's okay. We stand for a certain principle, and I'll speak about that in just a moment. But the reality is that HBCUs make a local impact. Many of those HBCUs serve as the catalyst for educating that community and those that surround it. And they release talent back into that community and that feed its industry, that feed its economy. And so I say this because I've been very fortunate to speak on a number of podcasts and in publications and write and so forth. And one of the points that I try to make is that, look, yes, it's great that we are Howard. We've got this national brand, international brand even. We get these huge donations. That's wonderful. But understand that that small HBCU that's in that small area in the country that very few people might know about on a national level, that place has made an impact for years, is making an impact now, and is positioned to make an impact for the future. So don't get caught up in this idea that HBCUs are this. No. HBCUs are that right there. And let me just end that by saying the reason that I think that's so important is because so many of our young people get diverted away from HBCUs because of just their unawareness. When if they can just be focused on what's right there in front of them, they can pick up an awesome education at a Wiley College or a phenomenal education at Clinton College, these smaller HBCUs that have definite impact. So thank you for introducing the locality aspect of it. Look, HBCUs have been around for over 100 plus years, proving a simple fact, and that is that there is a human condition that cannot be denied. And that human condition is that humans will always want to better themselves. They will always have this drive, this inner drive that comes from their creator God that forces them to seek out something that's greater than what they know today. And that same drive could not be snuffed out by years of chattel slavery. When they brought over our African ancestors into this nation and attempted to snuff out their access to better themselves through education, it could not be. And so there was this tremendous drive towards getting educated that was coming out of that slave class as they were freed after the Civil War. Now, we do know that HBCU started prior to then, as early as Cheney started in 1837. But do understand, though, that the majority, that this birth and this effect of what was coming out of slavery, this drive, this hunger that they had to educate themselves, had to be responded to. And so thankfully, there were those that were in position to be able to create avenues to do so, and those were the births of historically Black colleges and universities. So the question is, has that drive disappeared? Absolutely not. Have the barriers to education disappeared? Absolutely not. So is the relevance for HBCUs today still necessary? Absolutely so. And so today we are meeting that drive that young people still have today to go out and better themselves, especially in the Black community, because education has always been a hallmark of who we are and what we do. It has always been a way that we have decided that we're going to move up into the middle class, and from the middle class into the upper class. Education has always been that vein. So young people today still have that drive to be able to do so. The barriers still exist. We know that there's systematic racist activity that are happening within communities, within societies, within school systems that right now, and say, for example, in the urban core, who do not have access to AP classes or IB classes or extensive labs that they need in order to be prepared. This is a systematic issue. And so HBCUs are needed today to be able to give access to those young people who need them and to move them up and to do what it is that they ultimately need to do. But lastly, I would say on that is this, to all of y'all rich Black folk out there, all of y'all rich brown folk out there who have normally, and when I say normally, let me just say more traditionally over the last 20 to 30 to 50 years, have chosen to send their children over to PWIs. They're getting woke now because social media working for them too, to show that the incidents that are happening to Black folk on those campuses are real. And so we're seeing this reintroduction almost to the upper Black middle class to HBCUs. And so you're seeing HBCUs with growing numbers of Black and brown families that are of higher net worth, which I think is a phenomenon also that doesn't often get talked about.
Are you tired of all the emails and phone calls from colleges that you never even heard of? Sign up to where'smydocs.com and only work with the colleges that you choose. Where'smydocs.com, where college recruitment is made simple. Let the church say amen. Pastor June, so I love the fact that you mentioned the Wallies, because that was the other thing too. I'm like, what HBCUs don't get the credit that they deserve? Like besides the Wiley, Clinton, is there any other ones that you can mention? Because I know Dr. Fry's about to ask you some really good questions here in a second.
No. Listen, there's a plethora of those that might not get mentioned. I mean, we could talk about Claflin College in South Carolina that's doing a fantastic job. We could talk about St. Augustine down there in North Carolina. We could talk about Shaw College also in North Carolina. We can move over we can move to Texas. And even though it's been in a negative sense in the news, we could talk about Texas Southern, who's had a long history of producing scholars in that Houston community and so forth. So, I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. But again, the point here is the location, the locality, the impact to that local community, how that can sometimes get suffocated by sort of lumping all HBCUs into one bucket, kind of like how they do the Black folk, right? Every Black person is the same because of the skin color, which is not the truth, right? There's multiplicity of ideas and perspectives and lifestyles and backgrounds amongst people of color, and just the same as it is with HBCUs. All universities are a microcosm of society. Everything you find out there in society, you'll find those complexities within our campuses. So we need to respect that, and we need to honor that for their contributions both locally as well as to the principle of HBCUs nationally and globally.
So I've been kind of listening to a lot of schools who are suffering right now, especially as a result of COVID. And for all of you guys, you can answer this question. How do the schools like a Wiley, like a Clinton, like a St. Augustine, how do they win in recruitment in the midst of a COVID? I can start with you, Mr. Jones, Dr. Frierson, and then go ahead, David.
Well, COVID has certainly complicated things, no doubt about that. It is just not an HBCU phenomenon. It is a phenomenon of higher education itself. Gentlemen, as you know, higher education has a very flawed business model, right? I mean, we don't innovate as well as we should. We don't have a lot of market pressure. We don't respond to market pressure like other business or other industries. We're slow to change. And so it's difficult for us to turn out of a spin, out of a move. For many schools, we're not charging as much as we could charge, especially on the HBCU level, because many of us are trying to meet our mission, which is to serve underrepresented people who often don't have as much access to assets and free cash to be able to pay for higher ed. So it's a difficult place that we were in prior to the pandemic. Now you add the fact that employment has been devastated by the last year or so. It complicates issues even further. I do believe, unfortunately, that there will be significant damage that will be laid at the feet of some of our HBCUs, and it will be very tenuous in terms of will they be able to make it for the next two years or so. Now, there is a saving grace in this, in that because many of our schools determined that they were going to go online to serve their students, there was a cost savings in that. Yet at the same time, we also have to realize that in doing so, you give up revenue for residence life, you give up revenue for meals, you give up revenue for other auxiliaries like events that are hosted on your campus. So that revenue line is something that disappears from the bottom line, and you have to account for that. So it is a very difficult position. Lastly, I would say is that within K through 12, the number of young people that are successfully moving through from 10th grade to 11th grade to 12th grade, and ultimately graduating in a position to graduate, has been compromised, right? Many of our young people are struggling to learn online. Many school districts are struggling to keep their students engaged. And so the ability to be able to have talent to go out and recruit, that has become compromised. And again, for HBCUs, a majority of our talent that is attracted to us. That's an important key point, because some people will say, well, can a white person go to an HBCU? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
The challenge is who's attracted to HBCUs. So the majority of the people that's attracted to us are those that have been in the school systems in the most compromised position. So it's going to be interesting to see how we operate in this next year and a half to 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Mr. Jones. And I think about a couple of things when we talk about the impact of COVID. Number one, I think it highlights what's always been there. It's made it come to the forefront. We've always had these underwater issues, underlining issues that we don't have enough money for this, we don't have this, and this, and then it's really put PWIs, I feel like, on notice of this is the consequence when you're doing the arms race with one another, and you're not doing the heart race, an education race of the community. More and more communities or colleges and universities were competing by building. Now you got these building projects that are not done, and there's no revenue coming in, and so the bills are about to come due. Now you got states that are taking more away from higher education to balance out the state budgets for other places. So just as much as HBCUs are going to be impacted, I think PWI is going to be impacted, which I think silver lining, it might level the thing where people might say, well, look, hold on, I can get the same type of education more affordable and more something that's more culturally relevant to me, and I can see my identity and see people that I learn from, because the literature doesn't lie. People seem to do better when you learn from a community that looks like you, but there's also advantages of having diversity as well. Also, we have to look at the facts. HBCUs, historically, fundamentally wise, have always been more fiscally responsible and more efficient with their budget dollars compared to PWIs. They've been under-resourced historically through legacy, and there's a famous Supreme Court case back in '75 about that, about finding out about 17 states were purposely mismanaging funds that go to HBCUs. HBCUs account for over 80% of most of our professional degrees that come out for African Americans. So there's a lot of great impact, and so I think when minorities start to see what the value benefit is, then they might say, oh, this is a pretty good choice, I think sometimes the only barrier I think, and Mr. Jones can push back on this, is location. Depending on if I'm a minority student in Seattle traveling, that's flight costs and things like that and stuff like that. But but I still think there's a tremendous amount of value that we do not often highlight. And what has been looked at is we've always made judgments based off the money game, right? How much scholarship I can get, but then we forget about the character and the personal development game, right? Of like what reinforces my identity and purpose. And so I think at the heart of it, COVID is really highlighting a few things, but I think the number one thing is, for me, when I look at HBCUs and PWIs and higher education as an industry, is this a right or is this a privilege? That's always been the question. Is this a right or is this a privilege? And I think more and more people are now starting to realize that it needs to be a right and not a privilege, because privilege has always been through the lens of who's the minority, who's the majority decision makers, who determines how privilege is decided. And so I think we're starting to see that thing leveled out, which can possibly be really well. More and more institutions are getting rid of admission scores, GRE scores, things like that, which is opening up accessibility. But we still are playing this arms race, which is causing the inflation of the tuition dollars as well. So it would be interesting to see what happens, 10, 20 years from now. This is definitely, to me, one of those historical markers that we'll look at 100 years from now to see how did higher education, as Mr. Jones said, I'm speaking into Dr. Jones said, how is higher education pivoting, right? Because historically, the industry lags about 20 years to make adjustments. It takes about 20 years for higher education as an industry to adjust to what things are happening. So what is this, 2021? So by 2050, we should have a really good idea of how did higher education respond to COVID. Unfortunately, it'll take that long.
Yeah, so on the topic of recruitment, I find this interesting. Some of these points have been touched on already, but just having the lack of students to bring in. So one of the things that I've been questioning is how do we meet those students where they are and then integrate them into our university or college and make them feel a part and help them grow as we grow. I know it's gonna take time and it's a lot of investment, but at the end of the day, I know people don't like this term, but that is your customer, that is your target audience. So how do we, like I said, meet them where they are and then begin to build them up and walk them through those steps in order to graduate, to be successful, to pour back into those colleges, and also become a spokesperson for the place that they are located at. One of my questions would be, is knowing that your recruiters can't get back out into the streets and have those face-to-face interactions as they've had in the past and everything being in a virtual platform, how do you now get those students, and knowing that the students are basically depreciating, they're leaving. I know here in Colorado and some of our service areas, a lot of the students have just stopped going to school, period, because they don't have access. They don't have the internet access, they're not face-to-face. They're dealing with real world problems. So how do we get those students back into the door as they're leaving right now with everything else going on?
You know, it's interesting. I don't think that there's any good choices that are out there right now, quite frankly. And the reason is because higher education has always had to partner with the K through 12 systems or P through 13 systems in order to produce its product. Think of it as a vendor relationship, if you will. And so we are dependent. We really are dependent upon how well, we're largely dependent upon how well K through 12 decides to figure this out, how well states decide to help them figure it out, how well those localities, those school boards decide that they can figure it out and want to invest. And now we can nudge and we can support and we can offer advice and we can guide, but ultimately the ability to be able to move students through the system is in large part dependent upon the innovation and the intent of those particular school districts and states and localities that are out there. Now, that said, we do have tools from our vantage point that we can use. And you know, it's interesting that this COVID condition would happen at a time where our access to technology, or our use of technology rather, is at an all-time high. Thankfully, we have platforms that transcend the normal use of communication. That gives us the ability to be able to have a more nuanced conversation with these young people, not just, for example, on a computer or a laptop, but we can reach them by phone. And thankfully, many of our even under-resourced communities have a high percentage of those students who have a cell phone. And so there are tools to be able to have that kind of conversation with them through texts, messages and apps and so forth that we can talk to them with. Thankfully, we have two assets that could work before the pandemic and thankfully continue to work today. And there are two that are sometimes ignored in the larger picture of how do we move students back into going to college again and getting interested in even finishing high school and moving on. And those are the alumni of institutions, particularly Black college alumni, who tend to be very proud of their schools and very invested in the longevity of those institutions. And then we also have current students, right? The brothers, the sisters, the cousins, the next door neighbor, the guy in the hood, whoever it is that you know those individuals are still playing a role out there, right? They're still asking the questions of the young people and motivating them to think about this school or that school, or hey, here's my experience, or putting out things on Snapchat or any of these other social media vehicles about their current experience while they're in school. And those young people are, they're seeing that, and there's still this vein of and line of communication and effect that is out there through those two entities that I think have to be realized. And I think that that's going to play in large part to how we recover from this. The other thing I would go back to is what I said earlier. Education is a fundamental attitude amongst people of color, particularly Black folk. It has traditionally been how we have viewed a way to get up and get out. And I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. When you look at the images that flood our Black community, people who we aspire to be, they are often people who have a college education in some way. And so we point to them. And if they don't have it, they didn't do much to denounce it or to call it into question. And so, again, I think that these things are going to play out, as Dr. Frierson said, over time, but I do think that they are encouraging signs that we can depend upon to be able to have a positive effect. Last thing I would say is that, look, the Black community has some institutions that have been stable and that I think will continue to be stable. One is our Black colleges. The other is our Black businesses. The other is our Black healthcare system. So I'm talking now about Black hospitals, like what we have here at Howard, down in Nashville General Hospital that's connected to Meharry Medical College and so forth. And our Black churches, right? And mosque that are out there. These institutions all feed into that Black college, that college pillar. And so I think that they all will continue to affect those young people, their families that are out there, encouraging them to continue looking at us and moving in that direction. So I'm hopeful. I really sincerely am hopeful for what the future holds and how we can rebound and recover from this.
I think we definitely, when we look at the individual student, I think we have to do more in helping them understand the investment that college is. Right now the question is, why would I go to college if I'm going to go into debt and then I have to pay all this debt for 30 years? I'm going to be a financial slave. And we had in our last episode, it's college for everybody. I told people straight out, college is not for everybody, but education is. You don't have to necessarily go to college to get educated, to get whatever. However, but we also see statistically, and this bears proof in the numbers, that those who end up getting that degree do better and fulfilling back and giving back financial gain back to the community that they live in, and they do better giving back to their local community, their local churches. You have more economical gains to do that. So there are benefits on that side. I think what we have to really do is educate individuals on the individual level of, like, you are making an investment, and when you're doing this, you have to be mindful that there might be a payment on the back end, but that means you got to be understanding how you're doing your student loans, your financial aid. You got to be smart with that. I think the two things that scare people, at least from what I hear when I deal with students of color from the individual perspective, is number one, the testing, right? The GRE, SAT, to get in. And I always share my story. My test was horrible. So if I got in and I got a PhD, trust me, it's just perseverance. All you got to do is just take it again. All right. And then the second thing is the money aspect. People don't know sometimes what to do when they get that first financial aid check and they see big numbers and they just, woo, right? And you guys no, you want to come out. The goal for you when you come to college is to get two things simultaneously: a degree and limited amount of debt once you get that degree. And I think what's happening is we have more people who default on, $2,000 loans, $600 loans, because they don't know that no one's giving them that financial literacy on how to be smart in the process. So when they graduate, they only down to like a $50 loan or $100 on getting scholarships or internships, whatever have you. And so we really need to focus on that too, is helping people understand this is an investment, and an investment means that it's going to appreciate over time. if you do it right. And so I think that's really important as well, so that when the students do go to these schools, they know they have a financial game plan in their head, and they have support of the Black church, of the Black college, of the Black businesses. They have a support system that constantly tells them, stay focused, stay disciplined financially, so you can be free financially on the back end. Because I wholeheartedly agree. You know, when we think about education and higher education, people forget Africa and Asia are the two oldest civilizations on the country in the world, right? And so when we think about their startup and where higher education came from, we are rooted from that naturally. We are rooted from a collectivist understanding and tribal understanding of relationship, storytelling, and growth as a community. And it was only because of slavery that really disboggled that understanding for us coming here to America, and we're trying to get back to that. So we've always had that ingrained in our DNA, but we just need to be educated, to me, more efficiently on how to make dollars work for us through the process.
And Dr. Farson, would you agree that the mismanagement of those funds, of the access to finances to fund education, that mismanagement extends past just a student's college experience? It really is an issue that is resident in our own Black community, right? Our lack of recognition of how to utilize access to funds when we have it in the best manner possible. And so that goes back to what I was saying about, colleges and universities are a microcosm of what is happening in society. What we are managing on our campuses today, what you are managing there at your institution, what I'm managing here, and what others are, we are managing the same issues that are being managed outside of the four walls of that particular school. But I'm curious, Dr. Frost, if you think that, again, that this is an epidemic that we inherit within higher education that really starts within our own African American community, at least as it relates to Black folk.
Yeah, I think wholeheartedly yes. There's two things that I think when you say that I bring to light. Number one is that on the individual perspective, the system is no different than the credit card system. It's just that the credit card system, you don't get the check. You just get a card and you just keep swiping, right? But when you get the financial aid refund or whatever, you get this money right then and there, and you don't realize that the money they're giving you is that excess is supposed to spread out over time. And what do we do sometimes? Hey, I can go get my car fixed, because we have other needs, right? And it's the hope, just like in the credit card system. That's why for the longest time, for student loan debt was number one. What was number one debt? Credit card debt. What used to happen when we were in college, freshman year, sophomore year? What was the first thing you saw people walk up on you? Hey, you want to get this credit card? Because they knew you didn't know the financial discipline necessary while you were in college. You were just trying to make things work, and you wanted to have this flashy life and be independent, whatever. So I think we have to realize that they operate off the same, it's two sides of the same coin on that. And then two, I think when you think about holistically as community, yeah, and I also think going back to the industry of higher education in America, holistically, I think we have a flawed system. We work off a debt system, and there's been plenty of other models across the world, Denmark, Sweden, that really do what they call reverse modeling on financial aid. So what it is that you go to school for free, and if you graduate in that degree that you say you're going to get, and you don't get the money that we thought was going to be the average, we pay all your stuff off. If you graduate and you stay in that, we pay all your stuff off. It's only if you drop out and you don't graduate, that loan that you got from us now becomes your responsibility. But we're going to make sure that we support what you're trying to do. I think that's a wonderful system that we need to adopt here in America. But yes, I think part of what you're saying, Mr. Jones, is that there's a psychological thing that we do at the same time that is an epidemic of not being fiscally responsible, not having the understanding of we're going to have to pay this stuff back eventually, right? It's not free money. Scholarships, grants, free money. Financial aid, depending on if it's not Pell Grant, whatever, it's not free money. And so we have to think about those things. And yeah, I think there's a psychological effect that impacts brown and Black folks specifically because of the socioeconomic status that we tend to be in holistically as a nation. And we have to start beginning to find pathways out and look at the system does not always work for you if you don't know how to educate yourself through the system, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I agree. That was a long-winded answer to say ditto, amen.
Again, you're listening to the Educate You podcast being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. We talked a lot about financial literacy. Everybody, this is for everybody. Basically, I want to know, how do we keep the dollar in our community longer? How do we take that? Because somebody got to answer that question, because it's not been effective. I believe that HBCUs, Mr. Jones, with all the different businesses, because I was just in Atlanta, I was looking at the type of businesses who are downtown, and that's why the local question came about HBCU impact, because I feel like HBCUs can help the thriving economics in our community, but once the money is generated, how do we keep it there? So, David, I want you to jump in as my visionary, and then I'm gonna go backwards, Dr. Frierson, and then you, Mr. Jones.
I feel like the answer is there. It's just executing, right? Finding those places to be able to spend your money with, those Black-owned businesses to be able to spend your money with. That for me, a place in Southern Colorado is very hard to do. There's not a lot of Black-owned businesses around me, close to me, anything. So the only thing really I could do if I'm purchasing something online, trying to find people to do business with in that form, but also those businesses spending their money with other Black-owned businesses, whoever's backing their product or whatever they're doing. So I think that formula is there. It's just trying to find ways to execute it. But once again, like I said, in the space that I'm in, it's very, very difficult because there's nobody here. I'm out here by myself. So.
And I'm in North Colorado, so it ain't too much different up here. But I will be. Y'all know me, Lamont, David. Y'all know me. I'll be. I got to be transparent. I'm gonna sound hypocritical when I answer this question, okay? Because I'm gonna hit the root on why this doesn't happen. We're cheap. I'm cheap. I'm frugal. I'm really cheap. And here's the thing about it is, other communities they don't question the price when someone starts a business. We always want the hookup. Let's just be honest. We always want the hookup. Lamont, come on, man. Or David, come on, bro. You did those shoes. I know $150 though, bro, but me and you go way back. Let me give it for $100. We always want to barter and do the hookup. And I feel like other communities, they might do a little bit of that, but for the most part, they'd be like, hey, I'm supporting your business. I'm not going to try to, because we got this Black connection, do that, because you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't want that to be done to your business. And so sometimes we always looking for the deal, and we don't realize that sometimes the value of investing a little bit on the premium for the Black business actually helps the greater whole. So we have to understand that. But again, I'm being transparent. I'm cheap, right? And I'm just now at a point where I feel like I want to go beyond and just do that. But it took me a while to get there. So I'm just being real with y'all about that. And I feel like there's other people out there who's like, I just don't have it to do it. So I'm always trying to get the deal. But that's part of the reason why, is because for some reason, in our community, especially if you're not around a lot of Black culture, if you're not around a very dense Black culture invested city or whatever the case may be, like the Atlantas and Houstons and Dallases and stuff like that, Chicago, you're trying to be like, you're always trying to get that hookup. And so it's hard to support, as David said. You don't see as much. And number two, we have to realize that although it might seem like it's a lot to us at the stage, the premium is the investment that we're making into the community. And that helps us to where Mr. Jones said before, businesses support, they're the ones who provide scholarships to your kid later on. So if you're trying to get the hookup now, your daughter or your son's not going to get the scholarship later because they're not going to have the funds and the pool to go back and serve Black community. And so we have to recognize that, but we also have to be honest with ourselves and where we're at certain points in time.
Yeah. And I also think that, look, entrepreneurialism has been to Black people almost like the air that we breathe. I mean, it has been a natural rite of passage for us to own a business, to want to be independent and serve ourselves. And that idea has not gone away. The growth of Black businesses in the United States has kept pace with the growth of the Black community. But the retraction, where the retraction has happened, is in the access to capital. Right, our ability to be able to put our hands on the necessary funds to grow our businesses, to scale, and to keep up with inflation and other things that are impacting the market is a challenge. And I think that only within the last 10 years or so, maybe less than that, has that truly been recognized. I think that ironically, part of what's come out of the pandemic is a recognition by larger banks and financial institutions about the responsibility that they have and the opportunity that they have to support Black businesses and grow them, and how that can in turn fund the whole. So this idea of our ability to keep pace and to be competitive is something that is very crucial as well, and has hampered us from keeping that dollar spending in our community. But there's another piece to this also, and Dr. Frierson touched on it in some ways. There's a psychological aspect of what is Black is not good, right? That's like my grandfather would say, like the white man's ice is colder. That the fact that when we build a product and the competitor who is not Black builds a product, that it just happens to be better over there than it is over here. And that's just not with Black businesses. That comes out of a psychological attack that has been placed upon people of color, Black folk from slavery, that has lingered. It has been perpetuated through media. It's been perpetuated through literature. It's been perpetuated in a number of different ways. It's a sensational aspect of what sells today in television and movies, to still present us as the enemy and as underneath versus on top, and the problem than the solution. And we are susceptible as a Black people to that ourselves. And so now you translate that over to the Black business that puts up their awning next to that white business that does the same. And there's this idea that if I walk through that door versus the Black door, that I'm going to get something better over here than it is of that. Now that micro thought over time building up is like a piece of sand that is in between a brake pad and a rotor. That little bitty piece of sand, if you don't care for it, over time, that rub is going to warp that rotor, and you've got a $500 or $600 problem on your hand. And that's part of the problem that we're facing right now in the Black community. Now, I think as far as HBCUs go, we have two ways that we can help with this. Number one is, obviously, we can train more Black entrepreneurs. We can give them more education around how to do business and do it well. We certainly do that here at Howard at our School of Business. We're very proud of the programs that we have around that. And we could also, in that, teach them how to present themselves in a way that strengthens their ability to get that access to capital, right? To present the best possible argument that gives the least possible way to deny it to them. But secondarily, I think that we should be always looking to do a better job of leveraging our assets on the historically Black college campuses with the larger community. I think that we fight against our thoughts, against the thoughts of our alumni, and I'm one of them. I'm a Black college graduate. In fact, I have 14 members of my family who have all graduated from Black colleges, right? That span the gamut. And I have 2 children right now today that are being educated at Black colleges and doing well. So when I say alumni, I'm talking about myself as included. I'm married to a woman who has 2 degrees from Black colleges. And so I'm not indicting others, I'm indicting us. We fight against change when it comes to our schools. We fight against innovation. We want to keep everything the way that it was when we were sitting in the caf, when we were sleeping in the dorm, when we were walking or hanging out on the yard. And the reality is that the communities around many of our schools are changing. We are upset about gentrification, but is there an opportunity for us to position ourselves to participate in that gentrification? Can we negotiate? Can we bring ourselves? Many of our schools don't even have the privilege of going to the table and negotiating without there being an uproar amongst alums who run with little bits of pieces of information without understanding the whole. And I think that that's part of the way we're killing ourselves. But if we were to do that, could we provide the awning for a Black business? Could we provide the new buildings that the Black businesses could in which they could thrive? Could we provide access to opportunities that to our people through the development and negotiation and partnership with what's happening around us in those other communities? I think it's a fundamental question that we have to answer. And I think that the responsibility lies largely at the feet of us as alums who trumpet against this kind of activity and ultimately create a longer problem for our institutions.
Wow, that's that. Well, you said that you cannot allow tradition to be prisoner of innovation. That, you know, you cannot allow tradition to be prisoner of innovation, and I think that's very much so that ideological thought of like keep it like the good old days, and when we marry that, and it goes back to what you're saying too. There's two things I thought was really good. You know, number one, television tells you what to envision. So if you constantly see minorities in a negative stereotype or pictured in a certain way, you envision that, and which is weird because we're in this situation where like Black is bad, but then majority culture pretty much adopts everything that's Black and turns it into and makes it profitable. But then some kind of way we still be like, we don't recognize that. We recognize that they're stealing our culture, but we still pay premium over there instead of the business. And then I think another thing that you said, Mr. Jones, that is really pivotal to me anyway, is that, you know, one of my old finance professors who is Black, he always used to say, follow the money. You have to follow the money. And where does the root of the money come from? The banking system. We need more Black owned banks. You think about like the Asian community, there's a lot of banks that they own where they can say, I don't need to go to this particular type of bank to get my loan. I can go here and get my startup loan. I'm not going to be discriminated against. I'm going to get the best premium. I'm going to get the best interest rate. And they know who I am, and they're trying to and we don't have enough Black banks, Black owned banks. I think that's a critical piece, because that's the catalyst of funding it, right? We got to be able to get the loans, and we have to be able to get the loans at a comparable rate compared to our white counterparts, and not get at a higher rate or a depreciating value as when we try to do things as far as business and stuff goes as well. So I think those are really, really valid points that I hope the audience heard.
That's awesome. I'm loving this dialogue. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, Mr. Jones, because I was thinking about the title of this particular podcast, and it was basically like what's in the sauce. And I want to know what makes Howard special, man. You guys have a tremendous amount of powerful alum that walk the hill, as I heard. What makes Howard so special, man?
Well, there are obviously a number of things. At the heart of it, I think, is our location. We happen to be in the most influential city in the world. I mean, let's face it. If it's going to happen, something in Washington, D.C. is going to impact it. And that goes, and this positioning of where we are and our ability to be able to leverage that to be who we are today has gone all the way back to our very founding. I mean, I want you to understand that what we have in our Howard history is uncommon, not just the Black colleges, but the PWIs as well. The very president of the United States signed our charter. Howard is one of only two institutions that have a federally mandated and appropriated fund that it receives on an annual basis. No one has that. And that amount is up to the tune of I think last count was like $211 million that we receive from the feds each year. And so this over time has given Howard tremendous access to powerful people, powerful organizations, and has really opened up doors for our graduates to go in and be nurtured and make impact with a lower learning curve and quicker traction than likely most. And so we see that turned around. So that's one aspect of it. At the same time, Howard was founded as a solution to a problem. And that problem was the need to educate newly freed slaves. Oliver Howard was the chairman of the Freedmen's Bureau that was elected by Abraham Lincoln and then funded by Andrew Johnson. And he was, in effect, a Washington darling who had a lot of power and influence in this city. And they wanted to give him an institution that really capsulized his legacy. And that became Howard. So you have to think about where Oliver Howard was in his mentality. He was pro African American, if you will. He believed in the right of these individuals to be ingratiated in the larger American society. And so that made him anti everything that wasn't about that, right? That was the epitome of social justice at that time. So Howard was birthed out of a social justice attitude like many of our HBCUs were. And so unlike, say, our friends down in Tuskegee, whose attitude was more of a to be complacent and to sort of go along with what Southern mindsets and attitudes were about Black folk at that time. I'm not barraging that. Howard, like Fisk, my alma mater, was designed to do the exact opposite and to push against what was considered to be normal and expected for Black folk in that at that particular time period. And so that was attractive. That was attractive then to Black people, and it's attractive now. And so it pulled the best and brightest out of our communities into this institution. I mean, you've got to think about the growth of this place. You know, to go from effectively a small school of theology in its beginnings to now 13 schools and colleges with almost 11,000 young people from 40 different nations around the world. I mean, that's incredible. We get applications from all 50 states. You talked about the young person in Seattle. We get them applying from there. Over 30,000 applications almost for only 2,300 seats. So there is pent up demand for this social justice attitude that we have today. But again, it's not different than what they had back then. And so I think that all of that, along with the fact that we've been able over the course of our history to attract phenomenal scholars at this place. Over my right shoulder here, you see on the wall there, you may not be able to make the faces out, but that's the Howard Talented 10th. And so in that picture, you've got Charles Drew, you've got Charles Houston, you've got others who were top of their game, and all professors here at Howard at the same time, right? The first Black Rhodes Scholar, Alan Locke, is in that picture, and so forth, right? And so Howard's ability to attract this Black talent in its faculty ranks, I think, was very significant as well. Now, we all know after desegregation, and when predominantly white colleges wanted to attract or at least adhere to the needs of the demands of Black students that were coming into their campuses, we know that sort of began to challenge HBCUs and our ability to be able to attract and also retain some of that Black professorship. But for Howard, that has been less of an impact than other HBCUs because of how well resourced we are. So today we have, Donna Brazil with us here on this campus. We have Joy Reid teaching a course here on this campus. I think we just announced this past week that we have the former CEO of Ashley Stewart, who's going to be doing a course here on our campus. And the list sort of goes on and on and on and on and on. So we are a special place, no doubt. We don't take that for granted. We know that we are very blessed on this campus. I will tell you that as an enrollment professional, I take that very seriously. And in doing so, I try to give as much access to the types of tools that we are blessed to have here at Howard to my fellow HBCU enrollment leaders. I've hosted a number of webinars that I've invited them to, that I have told our vendors, look, you will do this webinar and you will do it for free. And we're going to invite all of these other HBCU folk to come on and hear what we're doing. Because I think that's what, reach back, right? Give back. We in our community do that. We are responsible for doing that. And I think that at Howard, we do that very well. Last thing I'll say on that is, in that vein, our president, Wayne A.I. Frederick, the Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, who is a 3-time Howard alum and very serious about this philosophy, created a program where pre-dentistry, pre-med program, pre-PhD, our summer programs are unique for HBCU young people to come to the Mecca, study for the summer on how to prepare to get access to med school, to dental school, to the PhD route. So that just shows you how we take it very seriously, our position as the Mecca here in this Washington, D.C. area.
I would be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to brother Baron Harvey and the beta chapter up at Howard.
Indeed.
So if I was to ask you who the real HU is,
oh gosh,
who?
That's biased. That's a biased question because you don't have a Hampton representative on this call. That's a biased question, Lamont.
Hey, I was just
asking. You can't ask a slighted question on that now.
I was just asking.
The diversity officer in me just said, no, we gotta have objectivity.
I was just asking. So we're coming to a close. So we always like to end on a positive note. Mr. Jones, you said about being underneath versus on top, and we always want our people to lead on top. So I'm giving everybody 30 seconds to give something inspirational to the people. David, Dr. Frierson, Mr. Jones.
I would say one of the things, I guess, for me that stood out a lot in this podcast was talking about finances. And I would just encourage everyone to start to get a relationship with money, not only from a parent perspective, but also with your kids. Start getting them into that environment so they understand the language, they understand what to do, how to manage their money. So hopefully once they reach the point of college, they'll have a little bit of a one-up. So they will know what to do with their money and how to manage it.
Every endeavor has a seed. I started out with the word seed, so I'm going to end with the seed. And what I mean by that is, for especially the youth here, you were the seed of your parents, the fruit of them, but that fruit came from the ground, and that fruit was based on roots. And so I want people to realize is that the harvest is only as good as the soil. And what you heard today is that HBCUs, it's particularly right now what we're talking with is Howard University, but HBCUs in general and then Howard provide the necessary carbon and nitrogen needed to make a fertile soil. That's the soil. So your roots have to be tapped into the soil for you to produce a harvest. And so really make sure, how can we give back and make sure that we're sowing seed into good ground? And HBCUs, as you heard today, are good ground. And so every fruit, it comes from the root, and that root is tied to the soil. So just make sure you recognize where your community and where your nurturing, your nutrients come from, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, and I'd love to take a spin on what Dr. Foster just said, and that is that, look, if there's anything that HBCUs represent for us as a Black people, it's our resilience. We are resilient people. Look at the course of our history. Look at what has taken place from the first Black African that was taken from Africa and brought to the United States until now. How we have not only survived, but managed to thrive. There is no way, there is absolutely no practical, logical way that in the American experiment, as it relates to higher education, and particularly the American experience as it relates to Black colleges, that we are to have 100 plus of our schools still alive today. But we do. It is a hallmark of the resilience that has been perpetuated through our generations since the very beginning of us stepping foot on these shores. And that's the resilience that's in you, young person. You are a product of that same type of persistence and dogmatic attitude to make it. You're made of some good, tough stuff. And so you've got to tap into that. You've got to ride that. And you've got to just use that to become all that God designed you to be when he released you into this earth realm. And HBCUs are here to help you along.
That was awesome. Pass the plate. Brother, if you ain't no pastor, somebody need to put you in somebody's church fast. But nevertheless, You've been listening to the Educate You podcast, brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Thank you, fellas, for an awesome show.